Why did you pick that music?
I just like the song.
Oh, sweet. Well, it reminds me of that we are in Sweet Home, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. Donna Francavilla filling in for Richard Dixon, who is in Biloxi gambling and hopefully making lots of money and then coming back and giving it to all of us. What are the chances? You're listening to WAPI 1070 AM. If you want to call in, the number is 944-1070. Toll free, it's 866-927-1070. And I'm Donna Francavilla. I am a reporter with CBS Radio. I've done that for about 15 years and sometimes fill in as a local TV reporter and write for various organizations like Agency France Presse. And I also am the owner of, Frankly Speaking Communications. You can follow me at Donna Francaville. My name's too long, so, it cuts off. And then there's no L-A. That's what happens when you have too many vowels. And and I have two websites, DonnaFrancavilla.com and FranklySpeakingCommunications.com, because or you can follow me on Facebook. Hey, join up with me on Facebook. I post like crazy because, I'm a communicator. We just do that naturally. So in the studio with me is Paul DeMarco, a fellow Italian. I'm really happy to see you, and thanks for coming in. I sure appreciate that, Paul.
Glad to be in with you on this beautiful Monday.
Well, thanks. You have been in politics. And you've seen the upside, the downside. You've been in state politics.
Yep.
And we've got lots of fun going on in Montgomery with this special session.
Yeah, Governor called a special session back in July, and the legislature is going in. The House is going in actually in about 25 minutes. The House is going in session. I think the Senate went in at 4 o'clock. So they'll take the bills will be introduced today, both in the House and the Senate, and they'll have to make some decisions of what they're going to do with the budget for the general fund budget in the next 9 days. The Constitution limits the number of days the legislature can be in session, so they've got 9 days, which I think is either next Tuesday or Wednesday of next week.
You think they can get it done?
There's a lot of question because, first of all, there was disagreement this past session, during the regular session, this past spring that ended in June, between the legislature and the governor on how to balance the budget. Both the House and Senate passed the general fund budget. And just for your listeners' sake, in Alabama, we have two budgets. We're one of the few states that have two budgets. The education budget that pays for everything that's related to students and teachers, K through 12, our two-year schools, community schools, and our universities. So that's one budget. And then the other budget pays for everything else.
Mm-hmm.
State troopers, the courts, mental health, prisons, Medicaid. And that's the budget that they're dealing with. They passed the education budget. The governor signed that budget back in the spring. That's taken care of. So this is all focused on the general fund budget. Again, in the spring, the governor made a bunch of proposals, and the legislature said, we're not crazy about them. They passed a budget, and the governor said no, and that's why we're back in a special session. And so we'll see what happens. Again, this time around, there's also some disagreement between the House and the Senate. So we'll see. But
the bill has to start in the House. We were talking about that a little earlier. Do you have the kind of manpower, the brain power in the House to get it done, to come up with a bill that everybody's going to agree with and sign off on?
Well, the revenue-generating bills do have to start in the House. The budgets can start in either House. So the question is, and there's several bills, and while this is a special session dealing with passing the budget, there are lots of bills that have been introduced, lots of bills that can be considered if they get the votes in a special session. But their number one priority is they've got to pass a budget. And they've got to pass it now because the state of Alabama, their fiscal year, the state's fiscal year is October 1st. So the legislature within the next less than 60 days now has to pass a budget.
What do you think about this way we've been operating all these years, just going basically from one crisis to another? Every time that we need a budget, it's like, oh, my God, what do we do now?
Well,
other states don't live like that.
Well, there's a lot of issues when it comes to that. Some of it is, again, Alabama has two budgets, and some folks have said consolidate those budgets. Other folks are concerned, wait a second, if you put those budgets together, the education general fund, you'll start taking all the problems in the general fund and put on education. We're already about 20% less dollars in education than we were in 2008.
And you don't want the education fund raided.
That's one of the concerns, is if you start putting the budgets together, you'll start taking money away from education. Because in the general fund budget, where we talked about that funds everything else, between 50 to 60% of those dollars go to two functions: prisons and Medicaid. And those costs keep on increasing every year. So what happens if you put the two budgets together? Are you going to start taking those dollars away from education? Because prisons and Medicaid keep on going up and up. And that's the concern. The other concern is earmarks. We're one of the states that has the most amount of earmarks that says those dollars have to go to this agency or to fund this entity. And so it doesn't give the legislature the flexibility when there are financial issues from time to time to be able to move those dollars around. So I think those are why you see, you hear from here, oh, we're looking for funding here, or there's a shortfall, particularly in the general fund budget, because the growth dollars, the taxes, there's more growth from year to year, are in the education budget. So
is Governor Bentley correct by saying we need to raise taxes in order to have a successful budget?
Well, I would disagree about this issue about raising taxes, and I think it'll be up to the legislature whether they agree. Right now, there is no consensus on raising taxes or on the gambling issue. I think the public is like, we always hear there's a crisis, and then what happens? You don't get it, and nothing happens. You heard about that 10, 12 years ago when the whole Amendment 1 came across in Alabama.
Yes.
Oh, you weren't going to have high school football. You were going to have this. Guess what? Amendment 1 didn't pass. High school football was still around. You look at
the lottery didn't pass.
Didn't pass. Everything was gone. You look at Jefferson County. Oh, we need the occupational tax. If we don't have the occupational tax, the lines are going to continue. There's no occupational tax. There are no lines at the courthouses. You look in Washington, D.C., the government closed. We're going to shut down the World War II Memorial. If you've been to the World War II Memorial, you wonder, it's not a building. Why did you shut it down? So you see that there's a lot of people are cynical about when they hear that government needs more money, while the public's like, you got to prove it to me.
So the sky is not falling.
Well, I think that's the public's belief because they've heard it so many times. Now, if you talk to the state agencies, they say, well, we do have concerns about our funding. But the public's heard it so many times, they're always very cynical when they hear that the sky is falling.
So let's talk a little bit about what the governor wants. What is your opinion? He wants to raise taxes, and he's also wanting to restructure the way we budget.
And I think the concern a lot of individuals have is, or at least from the legislative perspective, is the special session got called. They said, well, we've been looking at this issue. If you'd given us some more time, we would have had more time to kind of make a decision on long-term fixes. I don't think anybody wants any Band-Aids. I think everybody's saying, if you do feel there's a need for reform, let's look at everything long-term as opposed to some Band-Aid or short-term fixes. And I think that's all you're going to get during this session is let's patch together something, get the revenue you believe you need to get through this fiscal year, and then come back next year and say, look at everything. And look, there's nothing wrong with putting everything and saying, look, let's look at all these agencies. Are they operating as efficiently as they have? Could we operate differently? It's really a matter of priorities. What's important to you in the state of Alabama? And the citizens of the state of Alabama, what is important to you? Is it having more troopers on the road? Is it having these parks? Is it the mental health? You've got to do something. Again, Medicaid keeps on increasing. The prison costs keep on increasing. So I think it's a matter of priorities for the citizens of the state of Alabama, and then they have to relate those priorities to their House members and their Senate members and say, this is important to us, and this is not important to us.
I'm getting the I need to take a break signal. Any final thoughts on this subject before we let you go? And
we'll watch what happens with the legislature the next 9 days, and we'll see if they pass the budget or if the governor will have to call them again in special session.
And get them in line and get them working again, huh?
We'll see what happens the next 9 days.
Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in. I sure appreciate it. And former representative, and you did us proud by running. And
glad to be with you today.
Hopefully, you'll be politically active again.
Well, I appreciate it and glad to be with you today.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Donna Francavilla filling in for Richard Dixon. When we come back, we will talk to Birmingham's Mayor William Bell.
This is Richard Dixon.